It's like I have 5 minute version and 3 minutes. I wasn't going to make it. Go ahead.
Test.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Owens, Superintendent here with Indian River School District. I appreciate everyone coming out on this rainy evening. Joining us also online are a host of viewers as well from across the district, I hope. Our team in the back will be monitoring because we are going to take questions or comments, general statements, etc., both here this evening. So there'll be time at the end. I think we're going to cover most of what questions you may have as we present, but we may not. Or if you would like to offer a statement or a comment at the end, we ask that you do come to the podium so we can hear that online. We certainly don't want you to leave with any questions. So I'll get started. I'm joined this evening by our Director of Finance, Mrs. Tammy Smith. So again, June 5th is our referendum date, and I always like to start with a question that we received after our Board of Education elected to move forward with this second date after the March 20th referendum, and why is that occurring? So the board weighed a couple things, one of which was the voter turnout, which we had about 10,000 voters, both for and against the March 20th referendum. That was the largest turnout that we've ever had for a first round of a referendum. So that was very promising, although we hope to receive more on March 20th and certainly moving forward. But also really the big deciding factor with that was if we do not receive a passage of the referendum before June 30th, we do not have access to that revenue moving into the next school year. So our board weighed that very heavily and really felt it necessary to move forward now prior to moving into the next school year in an attempt to generate that revenue for next school year. So that's a big question that we did get, and I wanted just to share that as we get started here. So what is this ask for? Two things: increased operating costs. The current expense referendum is not anything related to capital, and that is increased operating costs, and I'll get into some specifics with that in just a few minutes, and also a competitive salary package. Our staff currently receives a nice salary package competitive with our surrounding districts here in Sussex County and similar across the state. And with the current teaching shortage, we certainly want to make sure we maintain that salary package for our great employees as we move into the future. It's important to note that we have not passed a current expense referendum since 2017. And that 8-year mark is the longest time we've gone from one referendum to the next. And I know that typically our district looks at around the 5 or 6 year mark, some a little more, some a little less. And that is consistent with what happens across the state. You generate a surplus after a referendum. You work from that surplus for as long as you possibly can in our district, and then you begin to deficit spend. That is inevitable in every district here across the state. And once you begin that deficit spending process, you begin to sound the alarm, so to speak, through your finance committees, through a board of education, et cetera. And then you begin planning for an upcoming referendum. And that's where we are now. So we have gone quite some time, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Here are the real nuts and bolts around the current expense aspect of this. And our operating expenses have been on the rise, on average, about 7.4%, where our revenues, on average, have been about 3.5%. That 3.5% is largely due to our population growth in the area, among other things, and Mrs. Smith will go through that a little bit more in detail here in a few minutes. But, our escalation is not unlike the community we're in now in our own home. So we are experiencing that here in the school district as well. And again, through our last referendum in 2017, that revenue base stays consistent. Here are our largest drivers of that escalation. As you can see, utility, transportation, substitutes. We have homebound mental health services, which is new over the last couple of years. That's a state mandate. Definitely needed, those counselors within our schools. However, there is an increased cost driver associated with that in charter and choice payments, which we'll cover here in a few slides from now. As you can see, the district's annual budget deficits since fiscal year 2023 have ranged anywhere from 4.2 million to 7.3 million. And without the passage of the referendum, we know that further shortfalls will continue. The referendum is what gets you back into that surplus area. The deficit spending does not go away without that revenue generated from the passage of a referendum. Here are some of the comparisons with those large cost drivers that I talked about. So you'll see that second column there, 2017, the increase in 2024, and we provided the percentage as well. I'm going to let Mrs. Smith talk a little bit about these, not in great detail, you can see here, but you may be wondering why the increase. Some of it you probably can draw your own conclusions, but she can provide a little bit more detail with each of those areas.
Thank you. So substitute costs have increased 72%. It's been a lot since 2017. That's in part due to, I believe it was FY19, the state passed paid parental leave. So what that affords our employees is 12 weeks of leave for both the birth parent and the non-birth parent. And that's paid leave. So when those employees are out, for the most part, we have to get substitutes for them. With those substitutes, we're paying the cost, except for when the substitute is for a classroom teacher. So if it's an interventionist or someone that's not directly in a classroom in front of children all day, every day, or it's a secretary or a custodian or any other employee, we have to bear the cost of those substitutes. In addition, because there's a shortage of substitutes in our area and we're competing with all of the other districts for that, we pay a premium over the state minimum for substitutes to be competitive in that area. So those two things combined have been the biggest drivers of those increases since 2017. And starting next January, the state's implementing a paid caregiver leave as well that will further burden those substitute costs. Homebound instructors are instructors that are providing after-school services to students with, say, medical conditions that can't be in our buildings. And we've had to increase pay on that since COVID to be able to get those teachers to do that in the evening hours. Our charter choice payments come from the students that we send out to other school districts or to charter schools. In Delaware, the local dollars have to follow the student. And so whenever a student at Indian River chooses to go to Cape Henlopen or a student at Indian River chooses to go to Sussex Academy, we have to send those dollars with that student. Back in 2017, we were actually bringing in more choice students than we were sending out. And over time, because we've had enrollment growth in our district, we have hit the capacity limits of those buildings and can't bring in additional students. So what's happened on the choice side is we are sending more dollars out than we're bringing in. And then since 2017, on the charter school side, we had Sussex Academy expand all the way down through kindergarten and up. So that was a huge increase for our district. And we've had 2 new charters open up in Sussex County, Sussex Montessori over in Seaford, and Brian Allen Stevenson School in Georgetown. Our utility costs have gone up 30% over that time, where the funding we get from the state for those utility costs has remained stagnant. We have gotten some additional funds based on enrollment, but the dollar value of that has stayed the same. And we all see in our own personal lives how our electric bills have increased over the past few years. Transportation costs for private and athletic transportation, that is not regulated by the state as the regular bus routes. So that has increased 176%. There's a shortage in the industry as well for bus drivers. So it's hard to get bus drivers to do this kind of work. And then back starting in FY23, the state implemented mental health services units. So that provides counselors, mental health counselors, and psychologists for our elementary, middle, and high school. That rolled in over the past 3 fiscal years, which has resulted in about 52 additional units for those positions. The state does pay their share of the salary cost, which is approximately 70%, but we're required to pick up the 30% local. So that adds an additional 1.8 million. So just those are some of the biggest cost drivers we've had since 2017. And that increase in total has been about 131%.
Okay, so I think we've covered most of these bullets here, but I just want to again reiterate that, we in a few slides, we're going to talk about some of the cuts that we've made in order to try to stay as lean as possible. However, those cuts really cannot offset what we need to generate through the referendum. And again, that is from the normal referendum cycle that we all experience. And again, that revenue is certainly needed now in order to get us to a place where we have that surplus. We bring ourselves out of the deficit spending, become whole, and then build up a little bit of a surplus as well. This just illustrates what I was referring to. You can see that first line here is the 2017 referendum. And prior to that, we were in a similar situation that we are now. We had been deficit spending and we had reached the point where a referendum was essential. We did go out a second time for that referendum and built up this surplus. And we were able to utilize that for quite some time. We also were able to utilize some of our federal funds that were afforded to us through the COVID pandemic. And those federal funds allowed us to, we believe, stretch probably an additional 2 years from what we would typically, when we would typically look for another referendum. So then around 2023, that deficit spending occurred. And again, it continues to occur until we pass that referendum. And here we are in 2025. And our hope is we get ourselves back into that surplus range. It's important to note this first bullet speaks to that competitive salary package and the environment here that we like to create at Indian River. We have been able to fill almost 100% of our positions. When I talk to my colleagues across the state, they're really struggling to fill positions. And some of those positions, those specialty areas like foreign language, your upper level courses that are very specialized, if you do not have a highly qualified master teacher in front of the students, they really do suffer. They aren't getting the services that we know that they deserve and need. And it's important to have those qualified teachers in front of our students. Okay, so I talked about some of our cost savings measures. These illustrate what we've done over the last several months. 19.4% reduction at the district office level. So those are various positions that serve across the district that we've consolidated positions or through retirement we have not filled, but overall about a 19.4% reduction. Our schools have reduced by about 10%. We've worked hard to try to not reduce our classroom positions because we know they are vital. We do not want those class sizes to go up unless we are in a situation where it's needed. So we've looked at positions across the board and tried to be very thoughtful in those cuts. However, any reductions that we're making obviously do impact our services. We've looked at some of our pay scales, the extra pay for extra responsibilities, often referred to as EPR. Those scales are for athletic and non-athletic positions. Those have been reduced. We've adjusted our hourly pay rates. Mrs. Smith talked about the tremendous increase in homebound services. We have reduced that pay for homebound and tutoring services. That was increased after COVID because we were unable to support our staff to be able to fill the positions needed for students that are need those services. So we have reduced those back down. We are currently evaluating and often do our after-school transportation services. And there you can see reduced staff positions at each school, as I mentioned earlier, across the board 10%. And the bottom two bullets, 77 positions governed by our teacher collective bargaining agreement and 55 paraprofessional positions in total. Again, I touched on those first two bullets, but it's important to note also that we have been utilizing for the last several years, and certainly now, our in-house transportation services. The district has never wanted to be in the transportation business. However, it is quite costly. And when we do not have services from our contractual folks that we have within the community, we have to look in-house. So over the last several years, we have purchased buses to the tune of 28. So that fleet is on the road every day providing services to our students. And if our contractual drivers are unable to fill routes, we tap into our own drivers. And there is a cost savings associated with that. However, it does, again, put us into the transportation business. Bullet 4 there is a energy savings initiative that the district entered into several years ago. It looks at everything from the light bulbs you use to our HVAC systems, including when temperatures are up, when they're low, just overall efficiency across the district, which has worked out well for us to ensure that we are not utilizing as much energy as we don't want to use any more energy than is needed. So that has been a nice cost savings to us as well. The federal E-rate program, that's a program offered by the state to ensure that we are getting the best prices for the multitude of technologies that we have within our school system. So that gives us a nice break as well. And we've explored other less expensive alternatives across the board, anything from transitioning from the Zoom to Teams platforms to the smart boards that we're utilizing, projectors. Everything is analyzed before we make those purchases. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Smith to talk about the components of our tax rate. And I do want to mention, we don't have a specific slide in this presentation, but our tax rate has remained the lowest in the county for as long as I can remember. And our board has worked hard and wants to ensure that we remain the lowest in the county. With this passage, we do bring ourselves up a little bit midway with our comparative districts here in Sussex County. However, we will remain at the bottom tier with tax rates. Mrs. Smith?
Okay, so if you're not aware, every August, the county sends out property tax bills, and the majority of your tax bill encompasses the district that you live in, Sussex Tech as a countywide tax, and the county tax itself. So each year, our board has to set our tax rates. Typically, we do that in June. They're due to the county in July for those bills that go out in August. I'll skip current expense for a second and come back to it. Debt service is a rate that is used to pay our principal and interest payments on our bonds. So back in 2020, we had a major capital expense referendum for the new Sussex Central High School. And with that authorized us to borrow the local share of that construction cost, and the state issues bonds on our behalf to pay for it. Then that rate just encompasses those principal and interest payments on that loan. Tuition is a rate that is used for special needs students. When we have students that live in our district, but we send them to Howard Tiana School because they need additional services, or Sussex Consortium or Delaware School for the Deaf, those kind of programs, that tax rate is collected to use for those expenses. And then minor capital improvements is a dollar amount that's given to us from the state each year. It's used for repairs and maintenance on our buildings and grounds. The state provides us 60% and we have to match 40%. So that rate is also set every year based on that dollar amount that comes from the state. And then current expense is what this referendum encompasses. So that's local operating dollars. So the local share of the salaries, like I talked about earlier, energy cost, instructional materials, custodial supplies, anything that is needed for the operation of a school district. That rate can only be set through a current expense referendum or changed during a year of reassessment. So when we went out for the March referendum, we have required advertising deadlines by Delaware law, and leading up to that, we didn't have the new assessed values. Those came out in mid-February from the county. So to alleviate confusion with that, we took the tax rates from the bills that it went out in August and calculated those down with the new assessed values. So now the tax rate is for last year would be 15.76 cents. The current expense rate will have some fluctuation as it relates to the referendum and the property values. For this referendum, the ask is the same as it was for March 20th. It's about $22.5 million, split up between operating expenses and competitive salary package. That rate is now 5.59 cents with those new assessed values. What that looks like for the average property owner, which now is about $481,000 of assessed value. It's about $269 per year, $22.40 per month, $5.17 per week, or 74 cents per day. What is important to note about that is that's typically how we advertise a referendum. What is the average taxpayer? What is the average increase? And you can look at your property and judge that for yourself. However, reassessment adds a layer of complexity to that for this year. There are properties that changed at different percentages, even if now they're at the same value. So we looked at some properties, I think there was about 6 of them that were about $461,000 now. And the old properties, like the old assessed values, were $15,000 and $19,000 and $50,000. So when they are all now assessed at the same value, their percentages change. So what that means is different taxpayers are going to have a different impact. We have on a future slide a calculator that will help with that, but I'll explain that when we get there. One of the biggest topics that came up in our March referendum was impact fees. So Newcastle County collects what's called voluntary school assessment. It's not voluntary, but it's allowed by law. Where there is a fee assessed on the building permits for buildings in major subdivisions that are not low income or over 55. Kent County has an impact fee program where it's applied to every building permit over a certain dollar amount. We have been working as a district for the past couple of years to lobby Sussex County Council to implement one of those programs. That would help alleviate overcrowding we've had in the district and help with that funding. The superintendent's group in Sussex County, the finance director's group in Sussex County have all written letters, spoken at county council meetings, had these discussions. Our board passed 2 resolutions in August 2023 and this past March to compel the county to do so. Finally, a couple of weeks ago, the Sussex County Council voted to take a look at an impact fee program. They like the Kent County model better than the VSA. So they are going to work with their local legislators to pursue that. They've talked about there being a minimum limit on that. So if you're adding a fence or a deck or something like that, that's not going to impact the enrollment of a school district, right? But a new house very well may. What is really important to note on this, though, we got a lot of questions last time about getting impact fees to help with the referendum and the revenue that's needed. But these funds can only be used for major capital. So if we had a vote to do an addition, do a renovation, build a new building, we could use those funds on the local share of that. We cannot use it for normal operating costs like electricity. This is the website on Sussex County's website that has all the reassessment information. They've got videos, they've got documents. If you're confused about reassessment, you have questions about that, certainly check that out. When we talk about reassessment, and I talk about calculating those tax rates down for the new property values, what we have to do by law is keep that revenue neutral. So whatever revenue we collect on current expense this year, we have to collect next year, ignoring referendum. That is written in code. Unfortunately, none of us have experienced that because it's been 50 years since there's been a reassessment. But for this year, we're slated to collect about $46 million in revenue. And that is a lot of money. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but our local salaries are about $46 million. We're a huge school district with 15 schools, almost 2,000 employees. There's a lot of things happening here. So there's a lot of money that has to be generated to go toward those expenses. But as I talked earlier, with making that rate revenue neutral is where we calculate that down to about 15.76 cents. Should the referendum pass with the 5.59 cent ask, then it becomes about 21.35 cents per $100 of assessed value. There is another piece in Delaware code that allows a school board in a year of reassessment to collect up to 10% in additional revenue. And that is meant to cover delinquencies, appeals, like the appeals process is still going on. There was an informal appeals process. Now there's a formal appeals process with the county. The deadline has passed, but they're still working through that and meeting with homeowners and looking at those assessed values. And then also it is meant to cover growth. So our district historically has been growing about 3.25% each year. Again, not enough to keep pace with the expenses that have escalated, but that 10% encompasses that growth that we would miss out on. Back in February, our school board voted to say if the referendum passes, we will not collect the additional 10%. We were hearing a lot from our taxpayers. There were concerns about, if we vote to pass this referendum, you could stick another 10% on top of us. Like, we're uncertain about that. We're not comfortable with that. So the board came out and said, no, that's not what is going to happen should the referendum pass. Next slide. Thank you. This is what the numbers look like if you are a math person. Our 1974 assessed values prior to the reassessment coming out was just under $2 billion. The reassessment changed that number to just over $40 billion in assessed values. So when we say we are adjusting that rate down, you can see what the 1974 values rate look like versus the 2023 values. But again, when you do the math, that calculates to receive that same amount of revenue. This is the slide I talked about earlier. This is our referendum increase calculator. So you can go on our website. There is a link to that. The county came out, I think it was in March, with a calculator where they took an estimate of each school district with the Sussex Tech rate and the Sussex County rate. And it's a range because there's some uncertainty. Boards could still vote to collect that 10%. The county was still in the process. They have a 15% they could add on. Although I believe the county came out last week or this week and said that they will remain revenue neutral and not do the 15%. but there's a tax range on there. It's on the county's website. We piggybacked off of that for our website and included a calculation of the referendum increase, and then a total of what that looks like. So again, as I talked about earlier, where the reassessment and the assessed values affected everyone differently, what we're encouraging everyone to do is go to this website and take a look at it. It has a link to the county website that will give you your new assessed values if you don't still have that Tyler Technologies letter that came in the mail. You can put in your new assessed value. It'll give you that range. And then there's a link to get your tax bill from last year. So if your mortgage company pays your tax bill and you never see it, or you just don't remember what you paid, you can look at that and then compare the range that this estimate gives you to what you actually paid. The analysis that we've done, it looks like about 52% of our properties will either pay less if the referendum passes or not more than $100 more. And that's because some of the assessed values went up so much with commercial properties and higher value properties that weren't paying an equitable share previously. On Sussex County's website, there's also information about tax assistance programs for seniors, disabled residents, disabled veterans, and low-income families. I'll talk about the two I am most familiar with. Disabled veterans is a state program. You have to meet a certain level of disability, but there's a form that you can fill out for a tax break there. For senior citizens, the rule is currently if you're over 65 and you've been domiciled in Delaware for at least 10 years, you are eligible for a tax credit on a 50% tax credit on your school taxes up to $500. There's legislation introduced each year to change that, and it's changed over the years, but that's currently what it is. If it applies to you or anyone you may know, please get the word out. I don't know how much that is advertised, but it's a simple form you can get on the county's website. You put in your name, address, parcel ID, a copy of your driver's license, mail it in to the county, and they put it on your tax bill, and you don't have to apply every year. What's great about those two programs is that's through the state. So our district doesn't actually lose funding when people apply for that and receive those credits. The state backfills that funding to us.
Okay, I think I touched on each of these. However, we wanted to put a slide here just to kind of illustrate the situation that we're in. Again, no new information on this slide, but does showcase academic programs, extracurricular programs, and athletic programs all would be on the table if we continue down this path. So we certainly want to be transparent with that with our community. We wanted to showcase all the things that are happening in our schools. If you come by our schools any nice afternoon, not necessarily this afternoon, but any afternoon in the spring, really from midsummer on, you are going to see a lot of activities in and around our schools. We have a tremendous amount of students that participate in lots of different extracurricular activities. And I'll start here from the bottom. Band and chorus are very successful in our schools and highly attended by our students, beginning in 5th grade all the way through high school. We have successful drama and theater programs, dance, robotics, Girls on the Run, Let Them Run, mock trial. These are just a handful of the activities that we offer throughout our schools from elementary on through. Athletic programs, very successful athletic programs at both of our high schools and our 3 middle schools. 45 high school offerings, 43 middle school offerings, including our unified sports that you may have read about. They were very successful, particularly here at Indian River this year. Great programs that partner students with disabilities with our students to be able to compete at a competitive level. Excel programs, International Baccalaureate, Spanish immersion across both of our 2 high schools, 2 of our middle schools, and 3 of our elementary schools. 12 dual enrollment offerings that we've established over the years, and those are partnerships with our local higher education institutions. 24 career and technical education pathways. So we want to not only prepare students academically, but also offer a host of career pathways for students that are desire to do that after college or right after graduation. So those course offerings are anything from our health occupations, education, structures, which is building. We added a new culinary program at Indian River High School recently. So we try to stay ahead of the curve with what our students are needing and wanting in order to be successful after they leave us. And finally, 24 advanced placement offerings. We've had a high level of success at both of our high schools with advanced placement courses, and again, preparing students for life beyond our high schools. Combined at Indian River High School and Sussex Central, class of 2024 was offered $14.8 million in college scholarships. So very successful students receiving that additional funding for life outside of our walls. I'm very pleased with that. Already, students have been offered $22.6 million in college scholarships, 923 college acceptances, several students accepted at Ivy League institutions, acceptances spanning from locally at Del Tech, Del State, University of Delaware, all the way to universities over in Argentina. We've had great acceptance to our HBCUs, DSU, UMES, Shaw University, to name a few, and 2 or 4 year college plans. Indian River High School, about 76.7%, and Sussex Central, about 60%. And we know not everyone is on a trajectory for college. So again, as I talked about those career pathways, we want to make sure we are preparing our students beyond our walls for career as well. So 12.5% students moving into the workforce, 11% to trade schools, and 4%, this is last year, to the military. So I say all that I firmly believe that our schools are certainly the nucleus within our community, and we don't take that lightly. We want to make sure we are offering a premier opportunity for our students, the students that you may be familiar with in the community, and we know it's incumbent upon us to provide that high level of service to our students, and we can only do that by having the revenue that's needed to continue to offer those exceptional programs. Okay, here are our dates. I do want to draw your attention to a couple changes. Long Neck Elementary is no longer a polling site, as is Selbyville Middle School. Selbyville Fire Hall is now being used, as well as the Methodist Church in Long Neck. We had accessibility issues at those two spots. If you've ever been in and around those two schools, parking is difficult. So we wanted to make sure that we are providing a good opportunity for folks to come in and out of the polling places. And these are chosen by our Department of Elections. So this was per the request, and we are happy to accommodate. Again, June 5th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Voter eligibility. So district residents who are U.S. citizens 18 years or older are eligible to vote. Voter registration is not required, but residents must provide proof of identification. You do not have to own a home to be eligible to vote, just a resident. And individual residents in the Indian River School District must be his or her primary residence. And again, time is running out here for absentee ballot, but there still is a couple days there. And here is the absentee ballot information if you are not available on June 5th. This is what the official ballot would look like. This is legal language that is required, but you can see here it ties back to the information we shared today, and this is what it'll look like. And again, we want to be able to answer questions from the community. Certainly, this is a great forum for you to ask this evening or provide a comment statement. However, if you leave here and you have additional information and you want to talk to someone, we do have the link there that you can email us. We will respond within a day or so, or you can call, and again, we will give you a call back. We have received less calls regarding reassessment. We're hoping that folks have used the calculator after last referendum and just being prepared within their own home, but we still are receiving some of those calls and just general information about the referendum. So again, happy to pass that along. So with that, thank you for, again, being here. We do ask if you have a question or comment, please join us at the podium. And I know our colleagues there in the back are monitoring anything that's coming in online. Well, I'll ask you to share that as well. But please, we offer the mic to you if you have a question, comment, general statement.
I'll get the ball rolling. Hello, my name is Blair Catlin Brown. I'm a resident of Indian River School District. I have an amazing sixth grader who goes to school in the district, and I'm a school social worker for the district, along as the president-elect of Indian River Education Association, IREA. I don't know if you all saw on the Facebook page yesterday, they posted a video that was made by one of our members on a shoestring budget of $0. So people get upset about that. But it's an amazing day in the life look at Selbyville Middle School. People told me how eye-opening it is just to see how big, busy, and amazing our schools truly are. The request of our members, IREA members, is that you watch that video. Consider all of those students, all of those programs, all of those moving parts, and ask if that could safely and successfully be done, managed, educated with less money or less people. If you think it can be, you know what, so be it. We're all entitled to our own opinion. But if you believe that it can be done, we need money to get this done, we ask that you come out on June 5th. Text everyone you know. Call everyone you know. We firmly believe that this community supports our education system. We firmly believe that. It's hard to believe it sometimes when we see the comments online, but we know the support's there. We just need people to get out. So please, June 5th, everyone you know, bring them on out. It really matters. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll try to make money. Really, probably hear me.
Are we good with online?
No, we would need
You don't mind.
But I just had a basic question. Like, you guys covered all your expenses pretty thoroughly here, but what is the total revenue for the district for 25? Would 225 million sound right?
It's close. It's about 240 million. That encompasses state, local, and federal funds.
And in 22, it was 178 million roughly. So about a $40 million increase in the last 3 years.
So that is just state and local funding, not including major capital improvements. And that encompasses, I don't have all the line items right here with me, but that encompasses a lot of things. The vast majority on the state side is about, if I'm remembering correctly, about $17 million in state salary, which in part is due to things like those mental health services units. Our enrollment, while it hasn't increased greatly, our units have increased because of the calculations and the ratios that the state has changed.
So 10,700, is that close to the current enrollment?
I believe so, yes.
And so it's up 160 kids in 3 years, roughly?
Roughly, I think so,
now,
yeah.
when they were doing the referendum for the new buildings, those numbers were much higher than that, correct?
Correct. Pre-COVID, yes, they were.
And so if those numbers are close, you guys are spending about $21,000 per student. Does that sound about right?
For 24, I believe it was just over 19,000.
And how does that compare to other districts?
I can't speak to other districts off the top of my head. I know we have data for the
I know the private
Mid-Atlantic
school in
region.
Berlin's $18,500 a year. So you guys are spending more than they are per student right now.
For which, I'm sorry.
Worcester Prep's $18,500 a year. And so you guys are spending more than they are per student at the private school.
Well, I think some of the issues there are, it's really hard to compare other states especially, or private schools. So I spoke earlier about the paid parental leave, right? So I know Maryland doesn't have paid parental leave. So there's costs there for both salary dollars for people that are out for 12 weeks and substitutes that aren't comparable to
So when
our
the state
program.
passes a law like that, they no way give you any additional compensation for that whatsoever.
The only thing they gave us for paid parental leave is the minimum state amount for classroom teachers. They did not give us the rest. We deal with unfunded mandates through the legislature every year.
And I'll just tell you what my objection to this is, okay?
Sure.
That, you know, the way the district, before the reassessment, Georgetown and Fenwick Island homeowners paid about the same in taxes. Now, theirs are going to go down significantly, and ours are going up by probably 2 or 3 times that number you're throwing around there. We don't use, and there's no kids there. I mean, I ride up and down the roads here every day. I've lived here my entire life. And there's farms that used to be just farms. There's one on Cedar Neck Road I go by every day now. There's 90 homes there. There's no school bus there any morning. So that went from probably paying $500 in property taxes to paying 90 or 100,000, probably more than $100,000 in property taxes. So I just don't understand where all this money goes.
So I don't know, well, I can't speak to individual taxpayers' properties off the top of my head, but that goes back, the reassessment, that was through a court order
I got it.
through the state,
That was
right?
because of the schools.
Well-
So in my opinion, that's working against you guys here.
Well,
When you say that's fair,
In
say
my-
the reassessment is working against you somewhat because people are angry about that.
right, and it is
And
a
thus
tough.
You're piling on top of it at the same time.
It's a tough time, and the court order that I read and the lawsuit talked about additional funding for schools, and the reassessment accomplishing that. However, there's the law that says that it has to be revenue neutral, so that's not accomplishing
That's
it.
Delaware law.
Right, it's
Yeah.
changing different property owners for paying that
I mean,
share.
like when Mr. Byerly was head of the school board, he used to talk about a 1 cent increase from the Fenwick line to the Indian River Inlet was $100,000. That's gonna be exponentially higher than that now. And the Eastern Sussex is getting hit with an unfair burden to this. And we don't use the resources. I mean, that's just my opinion, you know, but.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah.
I will say that, we are in an area where we have students that come back to our area because it's a wonderful place to be. So they are populating our hospitals, our restaurants. They are serving us. There are police officers. They are in our community. I see them, I interact with them. I know you do too, as well as anyone here that's out to eat or goes to the walk-in, whatever it is. And I want to make sure that we are doing our part to make sure they're educated. If they go off to college, they come back and they want to be here. And they're not going to come back if we don't have a good school system. To that point as well, we're not going to have individuals, doctors, for instance, that want to come to live in our area, to work with young kids, if it's not a good school system for them to be a part of. So I just feel very passionate that it's important for us to maintain the level of services that we've been able to offer over the years. And I get it. This is a difficult ask of anyone, anytime we're looking at a referendum. And we do have reassessment. So we're attempting to try to provide the education that we can so people have a great understanding. If they use the calculator, look at their past bills of where this impacts them. And then, it's up to that taxpayer to make that decision at the polls on June 5th.
Thank you. You want this, ma'am? No.
Thank you. My name's Camilla Conlon. I live in Selbyville. I'm here this evening in support of Dr. Owens, the Board of Education, and the referendum. I raised my 4 children in the Cape Henlopen School District. My oldest daughter entered kindergarten in 1986, and my youngest graduated in 2010. They all went on to attend and graduate from the higher education institutions of their choice. Today, I have 2 grandchildren in the Indian River schools. I also served 3 terms on the Cape Henlopen School Board. So I have firsthand knowledge of how education is funded in Delaware. It is complex, and it is, trust me, a unique process, one that differs greatly from surrounding states. Referendum, I will argue, is an antiquated process. I mean, who really wants to vote to raise our taxes? Nobody. However, it is the process in Delaware. Governor Myers has created a task force to review educational funding across the state into the future. But for now, referendum is the Delaware way. Sussex County Council approving the VSA and unfunded state mandates are things not under the control of any school district. These things have to be championed on other governmental arenas. Evidenced tonight by this presentation, the programs offered by Indian River are impressive by any district standards. While reading, writing, and arithmetic are very important, it is well proven through extensive research that it is the extracurriculars that keep students happy and in school. It is also well proven that being in school is key to academic success. During the unprecedented COVID years, our board made conscientious and compassionate financial decisions, trying not to further encumber us during a time of such uncertainty. But the time to catch up is now. Indian River has done a tremendous job of hiring and retaining top-notch teachers. But to maintain our high standards, we must ensure our salaries remain competitive. We all know the cost of everything: gas, utilities, supplies, maintenance, you name it. But all are just the basic ongoing expenses required to keep our schools running effectively and safely. I've now watched this presentation, thank you, Dr. Owens, 3 times, and have a great confidence the board has worked vigorously to streamline expenses and make the best decisions possible in deciding how Indian River's educational funds are spent. The future lies in today's students. Let's give them the teachers, the tools, and the support they need to succeed by voting for on June 5th. Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening, my name is Glenn Marshall. I live in the Cape District, but I've been in public safety for this county for over 30 years. I can appreciate your trials and tribulations with the fiscal challenges that you face. When we look at all the extracurriculars and what you bring to the table, and when we talk about the extracurriculars that are what keep students happy, involved, the thing that flies in the face of this is what just recently happened in your last board meeting when the decision was made to reduce the coverage for the safety of everyone involved when you got rid of the school resource officers in all the local communities, meaning that only the high schools have those resources. Now, I'm going to ask if my numbers are close to being correct, but those officers for 8 schools in those communities run under $300,000, correct? Am I close?
I think it was closer to $500,000, but.
Okay. Again, so this year alone, there have been over 12 school shootings, 2 fatalities, 12 injuries, 228 since 2018, right? So that's the most dramatic piece of this. The school resource officers establish relationships both in the school and outside in the community. They have different powers than the constables, they have a different presence, and they are deterrent. Maslow's hierarchy. Security, right above the physiological needs, the education, the feeling of self-esteem, all of that falls secondary to that. So my question and my concern is with the needs that are being presented, those constables or those student resource officers are not listed on your reduction. And the way that a community law enforcement chief, town manager, and mayor were disregarded, and I believe that discussion was presented that it would be tabled, and then in fact they inverted went to the private session, then came back for the second public, and they made that vote. So the transparency and the appearance of that just prior to the referendum kind of leaves a mark. So is there, because again, those individuals are not listed on the reduction, is there a plan to bring them back? Because there is a definitive need for the safety of the staff, the students, and also that spreads not only into the schools, but the community.
So I can reply to, I think, all of that. We've had a wonderful relationship with our local law enforcement, Delaware State Police, as well as our local municipalities. The board did vote to move forward with 3 Delaware State Police SROs, 1 here at Indian River High School, 2 at the Sussex Central High School complex. So those will remain in place. And as you mentioned, we do have constables, an armed constable at each of our schools. And that has been in place for roughly 10 years. I believe Indian River was the first to enact that initiative, and it's served us very, very well. The decision that night was to take no action at that time, and the board's dialogue back and forth was indeed, we want to make sure we have funding, we want to get through this referendum to see where our funding is, to be fiscally responsible. So it very well could come back at a future board meeting. It wasn't a no vote for the municipalities, it was to take no action at that time, but to take action at the high schools where the SROs receive the most activity.
Okay, but can we agree that that impact starts before the high schools? Because if you get that relationship established at the lower levels, that feeds off of the behavior and the environment at the high school level. So again, I come back to all of this is great, but if the people don't feel safe, it's not going to be successful.
Right. And to answer you, we've had, again, great relationships. We've had wonderful SROs over the years from our municipalities, one of which went on to a national position. Now he's back in the state of Delaware. We have programs that they've offered. So we know there is an impact there. And again, the board's aware of that. And I believe they'll bring that back up for future consideration.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nia Davis. I am a Selbyville resident. And forgive me if I missed it, but how are the federal dollars, how do they impact this referendum? Do you guys already know what your federal budget is going to be and this is in replace of, or how does that work?
So the state Department of Education receives the federal funds and allocates it to all of the districts and the charter schools each year. Ours has stayed relatively stable, at least over the past 5 years. So we have a preliminary idea of what that looks like next year, but that is restricted funding. So it's for specific purposes for special education or for our Title I schools for teachers there. So that really doesn't have an impact on the local side. I mean, it would if it all went away, right? But we don't have any information that that's going to happen. We don't believe that's going to happen. Haven't had any communication. But otherwise, the federal funds take care of its own things, and then the local funding is outside of that for operational. Like we can't use federal money to pay electric bills and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So the local covers that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Matt Schifano. I went to Indian River. I was born and raised right here in Sussex County. I was a teacher at Selbyville Middle School, at Indian River High School, and now I'm working in the district office. And I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make a couple comments. Since March, I've kind of been pulled a lot into the referendum conversations and answering questions and talking a lot about reassessment. And you bring up a great point with the reassessment and how is it fair? Is it not fair, right? For some people paying all this increase in taxes and some people paying less and some people have kids and some people don't. And I wanted to share a little story. So my wife is also born and raised from here. We were having dinner at our house a couple of months ago, and her dad, we had just developed this calculator, right? So we were having a little game, seeing where everyone's property taxes were going to come in come September. And ours is actually going down close to $700 a year, which is great for us, right? Even with the passing referendum, it's still going to go down about $300 or $400 a year. His siblings who had just moved to the area full time, they're all going down. And then he pulled his taxes up. And he has a property he's lived in Byard, Delaware for 40 years, 30 years, an old farmhouse that he bought for $1 off of a field and has been working on it for forever. And wouldn't you know it, this little 5-acre parcel with an old farmhouse is going up almost double. And he pulled out a comment like my 10-year-old says, well, that's not fair. I guess I'm the big loser. And I turned to him, I call him Dad, even though he's my father-in-law. I said, Dad, are you the big loser? I said, you have been underpaying for 40 years. We've been overpaying for a long time. And he goes, well, I guess maybe I'm not the big loser then. So this reassessment is definitely adding a complexity to everything. But I've talked to a lot of people where their taxes are going down and their taxes are going up. And this whole lawsuit is just about equality, right? And people's values change. And that's why this reassessment isn't once today, and the last one was 1974, and the next one will be 2050. I think they're going to be doing it more often. Is it like
5 years?
5 years. And it's just going to start to be a normal stream. So I think this is, a learning curve for the reassessment. And it's something we got to get over. The other thing that I wanted to mention is about our referendums. This particular referendum, I graduated from Indian River in 1996, and I wanted to look up a little information because my parents were both teachers in the district for 30 plus years. My mom started in the mid 70s. Indian River School District started in 1969, and I think the very first referendum was in 1972. So 3 years after we started, or it was established. Well, since I graduated IR in 96, in terms of current expense referendums, there has been 5 past current expense referendums, 5 in 30 years. Since our last past current expense in 2017, it's been 8 years. This is the longest stretch that we've gone in the last 30 years of a passing current expense referendum. And you see all this stuff on Facebook, right? Cost per kid is way higher. Kids' enrollment is level. Why are we spending so much per kid? And look at the test scores and all this stuff. The reality is, our revenue and tax rate has been the same for 8 years. Our teachers are getting raises, rightfully so. Our utility bills are going up, like all of ours. We have 15 very large houses in this district. We all have one house, right? It costs a lot to live. We have almost 2,000 employees. We have almost 11,000 kids. All of this costs money. And we haven't asked for a raise on our rates in 8 years. And if this referendum on June 5th doesn't pass, we'll be out asking again. Because it's just the way this cycle works in the state of Delaware, not Indian River School District, just the state of Delaware. And after this one passes, because it will, it has to, we're in deficit spending, it has to pass. In 5 to 8 years, guess what? We'll be given the same presentation because it's the life cycle in the state of Delaware. It's just the way things work. It's how it works. And we do have a choice in the matter. We can either vote yes or vote no. I, for one, am going to be voting for this referendum because I understand that education is extremely important and it costs money to educate kids. So that's really all I had to say. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Good luck on the 5th.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Wheatley. I'm the secondary math specialist. You've probably seen me make quite a few videos here and there, and I'm out and about on social media. I've already said a lot at some of these different meetings, but what I would like to say is that not counting employees here, if we look out into the crowd, I think there are 11 people that showed up here. There are about 55 online right now, so that's 66 people. If you think about that, we cut 77.25 teacher positions and 55 paraprofessionals. We just talked about how some of our SROs needed to be let go. There are lots of things that will happen if this referendum does not pass, and we don't necessarily know exactly what just yet. You've seen on the slides that there's a variety of things that can, but we can't make those decisions until later when we decide what's best for the kids. We have to look at everything all at once and say, what is absolutely necessary for these kids? Now, if we let go an SRO, it's going to have ripple effects, just like you said. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are huge ripple effects with that, right? We lost our science specialist. The science specialist had to go back into the classroom, which may or may not bump out another position. That science specialist is no longer at Ingram Pond, which did a lot of STEM-based activities. There are ripple effects that happen over and over and over. I appreciate, even if your vote is no, that you came out here to get informed, because right now what we are seeing is that this is something that affects 11,000 kids and 83,000 potential voters. 83,000 people out there can vote, and we only have about 15% of the population actually voting in this. So I really appreciate that everybody came out here. This is extremely, extremely important with all the ripple effects that are going on. And I hope you come out to vote on June 5th. Regardless if your vote is for or against, I hope you just come out and vote, and I hope that you tell other people to vote as well. Thanks.
Okay, any questions online that we may have not been able to answer? Any additional questions or comments from those that are here? We will hang around if you want to come see us afterwards. That's perfectly fine. Again, we appreciate all of you being here. Those of you that provided remarks, questions, we really do appreciate your involvement here and interest in our school district. And thank you for coming out on June 5th. I know everyone in this room will cast their vote, and we do appreciate that. Thank you. Good evening.